You're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam, streaming on iTunes, Google Podcasts, and at DCAUreview.com. Now, here's today's episode.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 32 of the DCAU Review. I'm your co-host Liam. With me as always is Cal. Cal, we got a big, exciting episode today, tying in with a certain movie which is coming out next weekend.
It's almost like we did it on purpose.
Are we that clever?
Like we planned it. Actually, pulling back the curtain, so to speak, we did look at this and like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we did an Aquaman episode the week before the Aquaman movie was released? And we said, yes, let's plan on doing that. And we were originally going to do the Superman episode, but then it just so happened that the whole Come From Behind vote for Secret Origins came about, and the third episode of Justice League just happens to be an Aquaman episode entitled The Enemy Below.
What are the chances?
Parts 1 and 2. I know. What are the chances? It worked out that way. But yeah, I'm excited to talk about this episode today. I was pleasantly surprised with the way that this episode turned out.
Yeah, and we've kind of mentioned this in passing. Season 1 of Justice League, I feel like at least the first half of it maybe doesn't have a great reputation amongst fans. And there's some stuff in there, and certainly when we get to some of the episodes like Legends down the line or Injustice for All, there's definitely fun to be had, but has a certain reputation. So getting into these early episodes, and obviously last week we didn't hate In Blackest Night, but we weren't giant fans of it either.
Right.
So having coming into this episode, obviously we remembered it was an Aquaman episode. Remember we were going to see Deadshot and some. We get to see the whole city of Atlantis. You get introduced to Orm, who of course in the comics becomes the Ocean Master, which we are robbed of. We never get to see DCAU Ocean Master with the big starfish on his face, or sea urchin, whatever it is.
Unfair.
Yeah, but getting jumping right into the plot here, really a pretty strong episode. You have some sort of Shakespearean Hamlet type stuff with the king's brother sort of conspiring against him and trying to kill him, trying to take his wife, trying to kill his own son as well.
You're so cerebral, Liam. Honestly, you made that connection, and I was just like, oh yeah, I guess it is like that.
And then you got it when I said it's like the Lion King.
And I was like, oh yeah. Of course, yes, very much like the Lion King.
I'm not sure which one came first, but either way, no. But you have that sort of subplot. You have the sort of overarching subplot of the distrust between the Atlanteans and the surface dwellers,
right?
And
which actually gets played out. We haven't reviewed it yet, but that is played out a little bit in the Superman the animated series episode that features Aquaman. They decided, despite the fact that artistically he looks like the 80s Aquaman with the orange shirt in that episode, and the short hair. He's very much portrayed like the 90s version of the Aquaman, who they sort of reinvented him as a character. They did a great job of making him more of less of the butt of a joke and more like a He-Man-esque, like a like a barbarian type.
He's a warrior king,
Right, he's not the laughing stock of the guy who's talking to seahorses. He's he's a rough and tough guy who's the king of Atlantis, who has a distaste for the people that are above the surface that pollute the ocean and such. So we didn't cover that episode specifically, but that incarnation continues in this in the Justice League.
Yes, he's grown his hair out and he has a beard now, but it's still the same old Aquaman.
Yep.
So you have that sort of the central conflict, and specifically Jon Stewart, the Green Lantern, is very pro America, we can't trust this guy. This guy's attacking a nuclear sub. We gotta, so you sort of have these different and you have sort of Superman and Wonder Woman and a few others sort of trying to play peacemaker in the middle of it, and then in the middle of it, it's revealed eventually, Orm pays Deadshot to try to assassinate Aquaman while he's on the surface world, to portray it as, the world governments took out the Atlantean king so that Orm may now declare war on the surface world.
And as we know, never ever would a government frame something to make it look like another government was evil in order to start a war for something.
No, they wouldn't try to kill someone.
Or start a war under false pretenses.
Right,
that doesn't happen.
No, that's you got to suspend your disbelief
so unrealistic
when you watch superhero cartoons. But yeah, so there's a little more real world creeping into our old cartoons here. But yeah, overall, I thought the plot here is really strong. It's focused. It's very epic. Mm-hmm. You mentioned off the air that the way the Atlanteans choose to attack the Earth is a little super frenzy.
Yeah, I'd say that's, we're going to melt the polar ice caps and it's going to flood the world.
Yes.
That's a little diabolical, I guess. But at the same time, I thought about it and they're like, oh, well, what if they just invaded the world? But then you're so close to Secret Origins at that point.
Yeah.
Where you don't want to just get in the habit of being a copy and paste. Oh, the Justice League has to defend America and the world against the XYZ, invader of the week.
Right.
So yeah, I get why they did it a little differently. They didn't just want to make it an invasion storyline part 4.
Yeah, that's fair. So yeah, I went ahead. I gave plot 7 out of 10. Like I said, I think it's good. It's very good. There's certain sequences as Orm starts to take over and the Atlantean soldiers turn against Aquaman. Mm-hmm. Again, as I mentioned, very Shakespearean. The scene, as we'll get to certainly in visuals, of he tries to kill Aquaman and Aquaman's infant son,
baby,
and there's also some stuff with Mira where she has to save the Justice League who's been captured. So there's a lot. They pack a lot into it, but I felt like unlike last week's episode, they used their time wisely. And it doesn't feel so bloated the way maybe last week's did.
Agreed. I think that is a fair assessment. I think that they focused the cliffhanger of this week's episode. So if you break it into the 2 episodes, the cliffhanger for part 1 is simply that Orm's taken over and that Aquaman's no longer going to be in charge. So it wasn't a surprise. It
right.
wasn't what's gonna happen. I mean, you still are left with okay, so what's gonna happen? But it wasn't like a shocking end to it, which served the episode much better, because if they had left it kind of ambiguous through the first part of the episode that Orm was the person that was trying to take over, that was very clear very early on that Orm is sneaky. He's trying to take over. He's trying to subvert Aquaman, and he does so at the end of part 1, and then you're left with part 2. Okay, how's Aquaman going to get back in charge?
Yep.
And how are the heroes of the show going to make it happen? So I think you're right. I think they did a great job of use of their time. I think that the scenes, the battle scenes, all feel very important and valid.
Yes.
To the story. It's not this, oh, we needed to add an action scene, so here's an action scene, like there may have been in last week's episode. I think it works very well, and I think if anything, I think the resolution at the end. There's still some tension. The tensions between Earth,
yes.
the Earth, the surface dwellers, and the Atlanteans really isn't solved. Other than Aquaman sort of realizing that they weren't responsible for trying to kill him. But there's still some tensions that are left unsettled. So that could have been resolved, but. That's kind of nitpicky. So my score for plot was a very different 8 out of 10.
Ooh, all right.
So pretty high for that one.
Yeah, definitely. Moving right along to music here.
Yeah.
You remarked before we went on the air here that this was probably the strongest episode for music so far.
I would agree. Yeah, absolutely. I think. I mean, not that was hard. Like we talked about in the first episode we covered in Secret Origins, it was very different than what we were used to.
Yeah.
And there was the final scene that included a song, that was, or a theme that was okay. Mm-hmm. But it was kind of forgettable otherwise. And then last week's episode, very forgettable also. This week, I think the action scenes are punctuated very well. The chase scene with Deadshot, the reveal of Deadshot, and then the ensuing chase scene that happens afterwards. The music is fantastic.
Absolutely.
And we talked about it. We've talked about it several times that they do chase scenes very well.
Mm-hmm.
The music with chase scenes, or something involving vehicles being chased, or something like that.
It's very frantic pace.
Yeah.
The music.
Yeah. It's done super well. I think that scene was great. I think the scene, of course, the scene with Aquaman. We've mentioned already once, but the Aquaman death scene, basically, where Orm's going to kill him, Aquaman, and his son.
Yes.
The music that accompanies that, also very frantic. You can feel the tension building in it, and he's getting to the point he's trying to escape, and he's minutes away from death, and watching his son be crushed or burned alive.
Yeah.
And he's frantic, he's trying to get free. So the music just adds to the tension. Then even the music in the last scene, in the battle between Orm and Aquaman, there's a choir effect to it. There's some vocals in there that add some tension to it and some real depth to it. But so for this reason, I gave music a 10 out of 10.
Wow.
Yeah, it is great in this episode. I think that it's funny because in animated series, Batman the Animated Series, we've talked a lot about themes and how important they are. And this episode didn't use a theme. It wasn't one theme that continued throughout the episode. Mm-hmm. But it was so good. I think it punctuated the scenes the way it needed to, and it was very, very, maybe not like memorable. You're not going to be humming it like you would The Last Laugh.
Sure,
but still very good. What about you?
Yeah, I went 7 out of 10. I think it's really good, really strong. But that lack of, I thought there was a few moments. There's a moment where, because Batman's not involved with the League at the start of the episode, he sort of makes his presence known after Aquaman's taken to the hospital. He sort of walks out of the shadows very dramatically. Mm-hmm. And I was waiting for the Batman theme, and we don't get it.
Yeah.
And there's a scene later when Deadshot is being chased. He's driving a motorcycle through the sewers, and he gets away from Wonder Woman, gets away from Martian Manhunter, gets away from Batman. He gets back up to surface level. He gets in a car and pulls away. And finally, Superman, who's been incapacitated for like 5 minutes because he got electrocuted, shows up to stop him, and he does. He heat visions Deadshot's tire, and the truck spins out, and so Superman reaches into the car and grabs Deadshot by his shirt, and I was like, that there, I'm just waiting for the Superman theme.
Yeah,
and it doesn't come.
I hear you.
So that, to me, it hurts just a little bit, but obviously still with 7 out of 10, still very good, very strong.
Yeah, I agree. We didn't even talk about in the plot of what a wuss Superman is, man.
Yeah,
it's rough, and I know they rectify it later. We have the benefit of knowing that they rectify it later. There's some great Superman,
and I get it because it's kind of a crutch of like, whoa, if these weapons are so tough that they can hurt Superman like that, these guys must be really bad news. Like, I get it. I think it becomes a crutch.
I think it's that, plus, if Superman can do this by himself, why do they need a Justice League?
Yeah.
So you have to make it, you got to bring in some other people. Oh, well, Superman's incapacitated, but it's okay. Here comes Martian Manhunter.
Right.
So I get it. Like, it's not the Superman show, but he's almost useless in this episode.
They find a better balance.
Yeah.
I think as the show goes on, certainly.
Agree.
Moving on to visuals, another really strong episode, I thought, for visuals here.
Yeah, I would agree.
From the opening scene, which it's sort of a stormy night, and the opening shot is of the ocean. You see the waves crashing, lightning, rain. The javelin flies down from space, goes under the water. And then you have sort of this fight scene with the Atlanteans versus the Justice League. So you have that. You have as we've already mentioned, the chase scene with Deadshot to sort of end part 1. And then part 2, where it's mostly just Aquaman and the Justice League fighting the Atlanteans. Again, you have a tremendous shot, whereas, as we mentioned, this is sort of a different type of Aquaman, more of the warrior. But he does have a moment where he's sort of being surrounded by Atlantean soldiers, and a big old whale jumps out of the water and splashes back down, and kind of creates a big wave that knocks a bunch of the soldiers away. And that was awesome.
Yeah, that was a great nod to, like you said, it's a nod to the 80s Aquaman. He controls fish, but he did it in such a cool, badass way.
Yes.
That it's really good.
Yeah, and then he rides the whale down to find where Orm is stowed away with the Doomsday device. So that was a really cool moment. Green Lantern gets a cool... We mentioned last week his visuals aren't quite as interesting. He does some cool stuff in here. I liked seeing the way... There's a scene where he goes to investigate the nuclear sub, and he's kind of in stealth mode, which is kind of funny because he's a giant glowing green man. But like he like Spider-Man's, he like attaches himself to an Atlantean ship, and then he's like using his ring like a flashlight, and he's sort of going through the ship, and some of the way he like sort of cuts a couple of the Atlantean ships in half, and then at the end he sort of just puts like a protective coat around Batman while Batman goes inside this Doomsday device to disarm it. But I thought Green Lantern was cool, and that also added to him and Aquaman sort of having to team up a little bit at the end after they'd had their tension earlier, which maybe goes more into plot. But yeah, overall I thought visuals were really strong. I went 8 out of 10 here. I thought they were really, really good for the most part.
Yeah, I shockingly agree. I thought visuals were very strong in this episode. I think, all those things that you mentioned are great. There were a couple cool nods also to maybe some from galaxies far, far away.
Ooh.
You had another back-to-tank-like device that Batman brings in, filled with saline water to restore Aquaman to health after Deadshot attacks. You had the introduction of the Deadshot character, who's a classic visual DC Comics villain. Like when you see him, you know what he looks like. He's got the scope attached to his face. He's got the gray hood, and visually he usually has a little bit of yellow. They didn't include as much yellow or any yellow, I think, in this version.
Yeah, it's pretty much just red and silver.
Red and silver, which is okay. It works perfectly. He's definitely recognizable. But yeah, I think that the amount of things that they had to animate in this episode, a lot of underwater stuff, a lot of hashtag hair movement, a lot of hashtag cape movement. I think they did a great job in doing so. There were some really cool shots. One of the shots where in the chase scene, actually, where Batman is on the roof and he shoots a grappling hook to begin the chase, and looks really cool. That whole scene was animated really well too. Chasing him through the sewer on a bike, and Wonder Woman smashes the ground, and the ground begins to crumble, around him as he's speeding through the sewer.
Sort of creates a cave-in in the sewers around Deadshot.
So such a good visual. I think visuals were very, very strong. Not a fan of Aquaman's mullet. I think that brought it down a tad. You can give him long hair without giving a mullet. That's what I didn't understand. And, you can give him long hair without being a mullet. But anyway, I digress. But I gave animation an 8 out of 10 in this episode.
Oh, very good. And now moving right along to our final category, that being voice acting. A lot of guest stars again this week. Not much in their way of trivia for them, unfortunately.
They did. What did you say? It's bad. It's a bad sign when you look up their IMDb page and they're most known for playing on Justice League or another DCAU cartoon, or
at the very least there isn't an instantly recognizable also known for acting role.
Sure.
They're known as Woman in 50 First Dates or something. As Kristen Bauer as Mira was, she played Woman in 50 First Dates.
Nice.
But anyway, Kristen Bauer plays Mira, who I think since I mentioned her, we might as well start with her. She does a fine job. It's a little different. We talked about this again off the air. If you're a little more familiar with the current comics, she's a badass, and she's as good of a fighter as Aquaman himself is, and is very much his equal. Versus here, where she's a little bit more of just the understanding, loving wife who then sort of has to cower in fear from Orm when he takes over.
Right.
So that characterization is a little jarring, maybe if you're familiar with the more modern version. If, like us, you're excited to see Amber Heard play her in Aquaman.
Absolutely.
In the live-action movie. But I thought, for what they asked of her, I thought she did a fine job. We do have Scott Rummel as Aquaman, different voice actor than played him in Superman. You had an interesting take because he is a bit monotone, but maybe that works to his advantage because he's playing sort of the uptight warrior king. Do you think that maybe actually helped that he wasn't so Saturday morning cartoon over the top?
Right. You remember his voice I remember his voice in Super Friends. Like, I can hear it thinking about it. And it's, it was a little goofy. Again, it is monotone, and I think that could have been detrimental to the character because he's so monotone, but he's also he's made out to be this warrior, this guy he's cold. Like, he does get a little opportunity to show a little emotion when he's talking to Mira in the one scene about whether or not he's creating the right kingdom that his son will inherit.
Yes.
But he doesn't need to show a lot of emotion. Like, his emotion that he needs to show is that he's tough and that he's determined, and through that it just comes off as he's a strong guy. I think it matches well. Also, they matched him well with the guy that did Orm's voice,
Richard Green, and they have they're supposed to be related, obviously. Yes.
They have a very similar cadence, they have a similar way of delivering things, and I think they interact very well together. The conversations that they have, the back and forth, I think it works really well. It could have, I think if he was a different character, then it could have been worse. It could have been a negative, I should say.
That's fair,
but I think it does work for him.
Yeah, no, I would tend to agree with that. I think he's as you mentioned, he kind of has the weight of the world on his shoulders because he's sort of torn between, he's not necessarily courting open war the way Orm is or his general is, but he's also he hasn't taken it off the table either.
Right. And
so trying to portray the strong leader who's sort of having doubts about himself, that's tough to do, especially in a 22 or 44 minute, in this case, children's cartoon.
Yep.
But I thought Scott Rummel did a pretty good job. And we also had Xander Berkeley as General Brack, who is maybe most famously a character on The Walking Dead.
Yeah, he plays one of the leaders. I forget what his name is on The Walking Dead.
Gregory.
Gregory. Who's like a cowardly leader of one of the settlements that refuses to kind of stand up to the evil villain Negan. So he's He's fine. Like, they don't ask a lot of him, and he has very few lines in this. But he's
sort of introduced as the character that's he's telling Aquaman that it's right to go to war, and
he's hungry for war, and then decides to side with Orm, and at the end he tries to back out and say that he was forced. So he plays sort of a cowardly character.
Yes, and it was also worth just mentioning because he has had several other DC voice acting roles. Played Captain Adam, I should say, in the Superman Batman Public Enemies movie.
Love that movie.
Which we will almost definitely be reviewing somewhere down the line.
That'll be an Elseworlds for sure.
Especially with the DCAU voice cast returning for that.
Absolutely.
For that film. But as well as he did some voices on Brave and the Bold and The Batman as well. So certainly a DC animation veteran, as we mentioned last week with some of our cast there. So yeah, overall, I thought voice acting is really very strong here. As far as main cast goes, well, it's funny, speaking of main cast, Michael Rosenbaum is in this episode, but the Flash isn't.
No, yeah, they made the interesting choice of casting him as Deadshot.
Yeah, and he's sort of doing, it's a little like Lex Luthor from Smallville, a little, and it's just like a little very dry, like.
Right, it's a little like kind of like California, it's a weird. It's weird. I think it works though. Like I didn't immediately go like, oh, it's the Flash. Like he does a good job of interpreting it as a different character.
Yeah, and that's always tough. I mean, we always think of on Leather Wings when the first voice you hear is Kevin Conroy playing the cop, and it's so obviously Kevin Conroy that it kind of takes you out of that moment.
Yep.
That never really happens with Deadshot. Obviously, later on, there's the Task Force X episode where he comes back and plays Deadshot again, and again, it's different enough, and that I think goes to Michael's talent as an actor.
Yeah.
Please adopt me as an actor, but as far as the main cast, got Kevin Conroy back as Batman this week.
It was good to have him back.
Yeah, it's just always it's nice to have the
and he
anchor.
plays a supporting role too. He's not the focus of the episode.
Correct.
He's still in the background. He's a little bit in part one. About the second half, comes about halfway through the part one, disappears for a little bit more. That comes back again for the very end of episode 2.
Correct. And we're still kind of waiting, and obviously we have a few episodes coming up where she is. Wonder Woman doesn't have a lot to say or a lot to do here, so I'm kind of itching to see Susan Eisenberg get to kind of stretch her legs a little bit more, and certainly once we get to like Paradise Lost and some of those episodes down the line, I'm sure we'll have a lot more to say about her. But yeah, overall, my voice acting score is another strong 7 out of 10 here.
Nice.
I thought they're really overall the guest cast is strong, and I thought the main cast, as well as we didn't mention him, but Phil Lamar as Green Lantern, kind of having the back and forth with Aquaman, I thought was really, really good as well. So it just felt like everyone was good.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. My voice acting score also 7 out of 10.
Shocking. Just as an aside here, behind the scenes, we've made the decision we no longer tell each other what our scores are before we record. And so when we have a score that's exactly the same, we came to it independently.
Right.
We swear.
We swear. Exactly.
All right. Well, I guess that would start to wrap us up here, but wait a second.
That's right. That's the bonus sound, Liam, which means...
I don't have a bonus point this week, so it must mean...
It is me. I do have a bonus point. My bonus point is for, and we mentioned it twice when we were talking before, but just the scene has... I felt it necessary to give a bonus point to it, but the scene with Aquaman near death with his son and Orm is done so incredibly well. We talked about the tension. We talked about the tension that the music adds. We talked about the stakes that are very, very high there. And my first thought initially was, it's so super villain of him, of Orm, to not just kill him there where he sits, but to chop a rock in half and cause it to head towards this underground volcano lava.
Yes,
it's like you're just asking for a guy to escape. But at the same time, if you think about it within the context of the story, Orm clearly despises his brother and is getting joy out of the fact he also could have stabbed the baby right in the face.
Yes,
but
they kind of hint that.
He pulls out the knife, and you're like, "Oh God, he's going to stab the baby in the face!" But he hooks the baby to the rock essentially using the knife, and so he was getting joy out of seeing not only Aquaman plummet to his death, but to force him to watch his son also either be crushed by this rock or burned alive or both. And the tension that builds and builds and builds, and he's frantic, and he gets his one arm free, and then he's pulling on the other one. He can't get the other one free, and then he pulls out his belt buckle, his Aquaman belt buckle.
Big A.
You think he bought that on the surface? Like he went up there, a novelty Aquaman belt buckle, but he pulls it out and he's hammering it away at the chain. It's not working, and then you see him look at it. You look at his hand. They cut to his hand. He pulls the belt buckle back, and then they cut just as he's bringing it down, and it's and I mean even there's right as soon as Orm leaves, he kind of lets out this scream at him of Orm.
It's very the Star Trek Khan moment.
Yes, it's really, really good. So that scene Man, really, really good. And then even the couple minutes afterwards, where he shows up in back in Atlantis, and his arm is wrapped up, and the reveal that he's gonna have his 90s hook added to
a little more Empire Strikes Back as well, in the scene where he's getting his hook attached.
Yep.
See the robot, not the robot. In the movie
Empire
it was
is the robot.
The sort of Atlantean, I guess, technician or whatever, sort of welding his hook onto his wrist there. There's a few more little Empire Strikes Back moments. And but overall, that scene, I mean, and the reason we didn't go into specifics in the other categories was because it so beautifully ties it all together.
Yeah.
There's great music, there's great lighting effect, there's great, the background is interesting. The lava, the light coming off of the lava, the shadows on his face, the way, the expressions on his face, the close up of the baby crying, the sound, the sound of the crying baby as you hear him exerting, trying to pull his other arm free. It's just all wrapped up so perfectly, and it's all those little extra bits that we talk about so often on that. What made these shows so special is that extra little effort put in, those extra few little details put in that really make this it's so memorable.
It's
and
really good.
It's like, it'll stick with me for a very long time.
Yeah, I was excited. I remember, I remember thinking that scene was pretty awesome when we saw it the first time, but it really stuck out this time.
Absolutely.
It was really good. So got an extra bonus point for that. So that brings up, with the bonus point, Liam, that brings up my total score for this episode, 34 out of 40.
Wow.
That's pretty high.
Definitely your highest Justice League so far.
Absolutely.
I'm in the same ballpark. 29 out of 40 for me.
Okay.
Really strong.
Yeah.
Definitely, as far as rewatchability goes, definitely recommend it.
Oh yeah, it definitely would.
Just because, as much, and again, this isn't so much building any of our regular Justice Leaguers so much as it's just building the larger world.
Absolutely.
Aquaman obviously comes back in season 2. He's back in Justice League Unlimited. But it's just more of that world, establishing even more, even though, again, some of these characters like Green Lanterns or Aquaman, who we did meet before in the Superman animated series, really just giving them some more depth, and then also throwing in, the villain, the assassin didn't have to be Deadshot.
Right.
It could have been nameless, guy with a missile launcher. But the fact that it is Deadshot, it just makes it a little bit cooler for nerds like us.
It is. It's super cool.
All right. Well, I guess we're going to start to wrap up here. As we're wrapping up here, we want to invite everybody to make sure you're looking at DCAUreview.com every week. That's where every Saturday morning, most Saturday mornings at least, at 10 a.m.
9 Central.
Correct. You will find our new episodes streaming there. You can also, of course, hopefully subscribe to us on iTunes or on the Google Podcast app.
Please do.
If you are a non-Apple user. And if you have the time, I know it's a little bit of a hassle, but we would appreciate a 5-star, and if you would leave us a review, we would really appreciate it. Those do actually really help us as far as getting the podcasts up in search algorithms and stuff. So just, if you just write a little blurb and give us 5 stars, we'd really appreciate it. No, it's a hassle, but we'd appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And Cal, I'll ask you, since I'm kind of steering the ship this week, where can the fine folks interact with us on the interwebs?
Well, technically, they could try and interact with us on Facebook, but much like the algorithms that you were talking about before, they work against us. So I don't recommend that. Find us if you like to, like us if you want to, but it's going to be hard to do so. You're going to have to find us because and you're going to have to search us out.
Correct.
You won't stumble upon us, that's for sure. But beyond that, I would say head over to twitter.com, which is a free website. And check out, find us at DCAU Review. That is our little Twitter handle there. That's Liam. You are the DCAU Twitter guru.
Correct.
So you handle the communications of that fine establishment. But it's a great opportunity, chance to give us some feedback. Let us know what did you think of this episode? What have you thought of the Justice League episode so far? Are there things that we should be looking at in the future going forward? If we decide to do some Elseworld stuff in the next couple of months, what would you like to hear? Plus, we just love talking fan theories and fan art and just talking about this stuff. The community of the DC animated universe is just so fun to be a part of. We're glad and privileged to be a part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely recommend. And make sure to check our pinned tweet at DCAUreview.com. We're doing a contest. We're giving away the Almost Got 'Em Batman the Animated Series board game.
So fun.
All you got to do is go ahead and like and retweet our pinned tweet at DCAU Review. And once we reach 250 followers, our lofty goal, we will be asking for the secret word. And Cal, remind our listener what that secret word is.
The secret word is Martian.
Martian. Yes, sir. All right. So with all that out of the way, we want to thank you very much for listening. I'm Liam.
And I'm Cal.
And we'll be back next week with another episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.